I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, what on earth is this chimpanzee woman doing, talking about nuclear weapons? Well, of course, one simple answer is that these nuclear weapons, the thought of them and what they have done and what we know they can do affects every single one of us. So we all should be able to stand up on a platform like this and talk about what it means to the human race. But secondly, I remember so vividly the end of World War II when I was in England. And I remember the stories, the pictures, and the horror of those bombs that fell. And I haven't been to Hiroshima, but I've been to Nagasaki. I've seen the pictures, I've seen the devastation. And so it affected me very, very deeply. I also know someone who was in the Peace Corps and was sent to the Marshall Islands, where the nuclear testing was done. And it affected him, the other Peace Corps volunteers who were with him, all died of cancer. He nearly died of cancer of the throat, and it's just a miracle that he has survived. So I feel a connection to these atomic weapons. But I think the reason that Jonathan invited me onto this panel is to think for a few minutes about what it is that has led us to behave in this way. And as most of you know, I spent many, many years studying chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. Whether we believe in evolution or not, it doesn't make any difference. If you look at the biology of the chimpanzee, the blood, the immune system, the anatomy of the brain, it's almost identical to ours. And the DNA of humans and chimps differs by only just over 1%. They are our closest living relatives on this planet today. And during the years that I studied them, seeing how similar in behavior to kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, swaggering, shaking the fist, using and making tools, long-term family supportive bonds that can last through a lifetime of up to 60 years. In all of these ways, so like us. And it was a shock to me to find they have a dark side. I thought they were like us, but nicer. Unfortunately, it turns out that that's not true. They are highly territorial, and the males patrol the boundaries of these territories fairly regularly. Sometimes all the males of a group, which may be anything up to about 10, sometimes just 2 or 3 of the males. And on these patrols, they are moving very silently. They may climb a tree and look out over what we can consider the hostile territory of a neighboring social group. And if they see 1 or maybe 2 individuals, they will chase. If they catch that unfortunate victim, subject him or usually her actually, to an extraordinarily brutal attack. And at a certain point in time, the large community that I've been observing for several years split, and 7 of the males moved into the south of the range they once had shared with some of the females and set up a territory there. The males of the larger community immediately began patrolling through the no man's land between, and one by one, over a 4-year period, all 7 of those males who broke away and who were living in an area which had been part of the joint range were killed. They were attacked so brutally and so savagely that they died of their wounds. These were individuals who had traveled together, groomed each other, fed together, probably played together as infants. And now, because they've moved to another territory, they're out-group rather than in-group. And what was particularly shocking was that, yes, there can be aggression within the community, sometimes quite fierce fights, but we've never seen anything like we saw when the males attacked those southern males who had become strangers. Then we saw behavior which is normally only seen when chimpanzees are hunting and trying to kill a monkey or something like that, twisting of limbs, drinking of blood. It was horrifying. And it really gave me pause to think. One of the things I think that chimpanzees do for us is to help us understand what it means to be human. We can spend a lot of time thinking about the similarities between humans and chimpanzees, but then we must stand back and say, yes, but we're different. And what is it that makes us different? One of the questions I was always being tackled with when I first began talking about these aggressive incidents was, well, is aggression inevitable in human behavior? And if we believe in evolution, and Louis Leakey, who set me on my path, spent his life looking for the fossilized remains of early man. And he believed, because of the similarities between modern human and modern chimp, that if there was a common ancestor about 6 million years ago, and as I say, it doesn't matter if you believe that or not, that was what he believed. So if there was such a thing as a common ancestor, an ape-like, human-like creature, then behavior seen today in chimps and humans maybe had its origin in that 6 million year ago common ancestor, and therefore we've brought these aggressive traits so obvious in the chimpanzees with us throughout our evolution. There was a big debate when I began my studies in the 60s about nature versus nurture, and many people were saying aggression is learned. They believed in the noble savage theory, that we're good and pure and beautiful, and then we're born into a culture which teaches us how to be aggressive, or, on the other hand, how to be loving. But I think if we look around the world today, and in many ways it's a very sad world, we see aggression everywhere. We see aggression between nations, we see domestic violence, we see so many examples of aggression. But come back to the point I just made. Even if we believe in evolution, even if we believe we have this kind of relation with our closest living relatives, the chimpanzees, we are different. And I think one of the, if I'm asked to pick, I mean, there's lots of little differences, of course, but if I'm asked to pick the one main difference, it's the explosive development of the human intellect. Yes, chimps are way more intelligent than we used to think. Chimps can do complex problem solving on computers. They can learn 400 or more of the signs of ASL, American Sign Language, as used by deaf people. But it doesn't make sense to compare the brain of the brightest chimpanzee with a brain that made nuclear weapons. Fortunately, our brain hasn't only involved itself with destruction, but has created all kinds of amazing and beneficial technology. And so, with this intellect of ours, which makes us more different from the other animals than anything else, we now have come to a time when we've got to make a choice. If we believe that within us there is this aggressive tendency, as so clear in the chimpanzees, we must also realize that we also have love, compassion, and altruism within us, as is demonstrated so clearly by the chimpanzees. So now comes this choice. Which of those two creatures within us are we going to nurture? Which of those two creatures are we going to develop? If we think about nuclear weapons, if we think about modern warfare, it becomes very obvious that it's this intellect which has moved us away from a simple response to aggression, response to the sight of a stranger. Oh, and you get a rush of adrenaline and you say, I've got to go off and hurt that person, I've got to go and kill that person. That's how the chimpanzees respond. That's what triggers their aggression. And that's what triggers an awful lot of human aggression. But we also have reached the stage where people sit and plan weapons of destruction. Sit and plan war. Yes, this will be very good for the economy of our nation if we go to war. Yes, this will fuel the arms industry. And so we've changed. And so we find ourselves living in a culture which in so many parts of the world is a materialistic culture. And we seem to have lost a wisdom which said that the decisions we make today, before we make them, before we shake hands and say, yes, this is what I'm going to do, how will this affect our people generations ahead? And now it's how will it affect me now, and how will it affect the next shareholders meeting? How will it affect the economy of my country, and how will it affect my next political campaign? Those are the kind of questions we ask ourselves. And so you see, we've come a long way from the chimpanzees. And we are now faced, I believe, it's a time of crisis. There are many biologists who will stand and say, we've reached a point of no return with climate change, with pollution, with human population growth, all of these things coming together. Many people say we've reached a point of no return. I choose not to believe that. Maybe it's wishful thinking. I think there's a window of time. I truly believe that we can make change, and that if enough people join hands and link this clever brain to the heart, love and compassion, then we can effect change. And that's why I'm spending so much of my time now devoted to developing and growing around the world a program for young people from preschool through university. It's now in 140 countries with about 100,000 active groups. And the message, every single one of us, every one of us, makes a difference every day. You can't live through a day without making some kind of impact. And we have a choice as to what kind of impact we're going to make. And also part of the philosophy of this Roots and Shoots program is young people sharing a philosophy, young people who are not afraid to talk about love and the heart, and young people who understand that while we need money to live, it goes wrong when we live for money in and of itself, unless we're raising the money to do good. So that's the message I have.